Welcome to the live reading of the 2018 Grieve Writing Competition. My name is Karen Crofts and I am Director of Hunter Writers Centre. This is the 6th year of the Grieve project, but it's only the first time that we broadcast our live reading across the internet. We are thrilled to be able to present this live reading across the internet because so many entrants into the competition and so many finalists live in all parts of Australia. So from the comfort of your own lounge room, you can sit back and hear this broadcast from Newcastle. When we first set out to gather partners for the Grieve project, we contacted first the National Association of Loss and Grief, also known as NALAG. We rang them and asked if they would partner with us to take the Grieve project across New South Wales, seeing as we were based in New South Wales and so are they. However, Trudy Hanson, the CEO of NALAG, instantly said, well, why stop at New South Wales? Grief doesn't stop at the border. Which is absolutely true, and that is why this is now a national project. 5 years later, we have 15 organisations partnered with us. We have 6 authors involved in the judging process, and we have 22 awards to announce today. We thank our sponsors and our judges for all the work they put in, reading, selecting, discussing, debating, to come up with the 110 works that feature in the book this year. We would like to let you know about grieveproject.org. This is a new dedicated website that we have created this year for the project. This website houses many stories and poems, samples there for you to read, and also audio and video recordings and all the books. This enables us to reach right across the world with a dedicated site, taking your stories and your poems throughout the world. Any profits from sales done through the grieveproject.org website will be returned to the project itself. Hunter Writers Centre is a fully not-for-profit incorporated association. Now on to the awards. There is a small award that we ask you to participate in. Our local bookseller, Maclean's Booksellers, donates a book voucher to the value of $100 to a piece that's selected by you. So at the conclusion of this broadcast, if you would like to email us and let us know the piece that you liked the most, the one that spoke to you the most. So grab a pen and paper, you might want to take down some notes as you listen to these pieces. The titles will appear on the screen along with the author's name, and I will announce the award and who reads the piece to you. Thank you for listening in today, and we hope you enjoy the journey through these 22 prize-winning pieces. The first works you'll hear today are the ones awarded by Hunter Writers Centre. It's always thrilling to see that Hunter Writers Centre members make it into the finalist list, and today's reading is by Anthony, and it was awarded to the piece There Are Days. The second piece you'll hear is the piece awarded from the general list. Hunter Writers Centre likes to look for a piece that is written with strong and clear writing, and this year we awarded the piece Sometimes Love Isn't Enough, which I will read. This piece covers grief approximately 25 years in time span, and it is written with such clear and strong writing that captures the pain in such a direct, no-nonsense way. Here are the 2 readings.
There are days I could live where trees cluster jumble-rooted in a tangle of bush. Days I could live in an old grizzled banksia, coiled in fat gnarly branchings lazing. Or nestled far up in a eucalypt, dozing, in scribbled limbs reaching into blue nothing. Days I could perch as still as a tawny frogmouth, unseen as much a part of a tree as a branch. Days I could lie under lichen-splattered casuarinas for unthinking hours on a needle-soft bed, or crouch against a melaleuca's messy drapings and wrap myself to sleep in paperbark layers. Days I could burrow into leaf and earth and wait for the growing of wings to flutter me into the blue. Today's such a day as this. Not a day for watching my child syringed and tubes strung to bags of chemotherapy drugs.
You looked the same as your sister on the scan, a moving blob with 2 legs, 2 arms and an oversized head floating in the clear waters of expectation. When the sonographer joked about your undercarriage, we knew you were a boy. I wasn't looking for anything else. Your illness was invisible back then. There was no sign of the crossed wires and chemical imbalance in that dancing body that lit up the screen. We made plans and assumptions. We hoped you would have your dad's brain, his perfect nose, and his talent for hitting a ball. Secretly, I hoped you'd get my creativity, my thick hair, and my passion for the arts. You would be your sister's best friend. Your talent for music was a surprise, especially when Dad is tone deaf, and the only tune I can play on piano is When the Saints Go Marching In. And I didn't want to curb your creativity, but the way those lyrics grew in your brain with the ferocity of cancer, and were later inscribed on your arms, was obviously the first real sign. I was proud of your overwhelming sensitivity to injustice as well, until you directed it at us. We assumed that if we loved you and did right by you, you would love us back in the same unconditional way, like for like. But something I should have known is that living life isn't a process that necessarily works to plan. Not everyone gets a fair go. Sometimes love simply isn't enough. We should have known that we couldn't protect you from the ugliness of your peers, nor could we force them to accept you. We should have identified that by accepting your anger. We were doing you a disservice. The posh word for that is enabling, the psych told us, which roughly translated means that we weren't helping you by loving you that much. We weren't the great parents we assumed we would be at the scan. I still can't explain what happened to that innocent fetus that waved at us from the screen, or the perfect life we had mapped out for him. When did the cheeky grin disappear and laughing green eyes fill with hollow inkiness? Where did that obsessive desire to puncture the fabric of society come from? My heart aches when I see you now, when I know that it should be overflowing with love and pride, a mother's pride. I hate the way your dad struggles to make eye contact with you, or how much that hurts you. I hate the way I trip over my words when friends ask about you, and how the dog and your sister flinch whenever they hear your key in the door. I became that mother who could throw her son out of his home and then bathe for days in her own tears. Tell me what else I could have done. Tell me why love wasn't enough. Now we announce 2 $100 prizes. One is donated by Compassionate Friends and the other is donated by Suicide Prevention Australia. We're very grateful for the 2 suicide prevention networks supporting Grieve. So here are 2 pieces to receive those 2 awards.
At 12 weeks, I go for the scan at the UN clinic in Dili. The doctor tells me that the fetus is not fully formed and that I will miscarry soon. As I stand to leave, I thank her, and immediately after, I don't know why I've done this. Perhaps I want her to think that I'm coping. Perhaps I'm embarrassed by the fact that this doctor who I've just met has had to tell me that my pregnancy will end. Perhaps I feel a failure. Perhaps I don't know what to make of this, of the very guts of life and death going on inside me, happening to me, but somehow without my full comprehension. A year later, we have a small ceremony for the baby in the cemetery above Maliana town, my husband's hometown. Amma, my mother-in-law, and Auntie Joanna have been at me about it. Where did I put it? Auntie Joanna asks. By that she means the largest clot, the bud, which might have become a baby. I flushed it down the toilet, I think, but don't say. You didn't keep it, she persists. No, I didn't. Ever practical, they decide that a ceremony should be held nonetheless. The little ones can be spiteful, Amma says. They can cause no end of trouble for a mother if they're not laid to rest. Maliana Cemetery sits on a hill above the town and the lush, broad Maliana Plain. In the crowded section of the cemetery where other family members are buried, there is a wide, short concrete grave, painted blue, and with a row of small concrete crosses above it. The word Anzu, angel, had been etched into the grave long ago. This is where other babies, other angels are buried. While our two girls play among the headstones, and my husband and relatives tend other graves, Amma, Auntie Joanna and myself gather beside the angel's grave. Auntie Joanna lights a candle and fixes it into the earth. She says some prayers and makes an offering of a few coins. She buries a small square of blue cloth decorated with tiny yellow flowers. She addresses the child. You rest in peace now, she says firmly. Don't go bothering the mother. Then we turn our backs on the candle, still burning on the ground, pile into the car, and sweep back down the hill into town. It will only be later that I'll feel as if something I hadn't even known was awry has been put to rest. Still, sometimes I think of him, of her. They hover at the periphery of my consciousness, this life that was ours for a time, then not, in me for a time, then gone. You rest in peace now, a good angel, a fleeting angel, mine, not mine. We marked your place with the other angels, beside a small blue concrete grave, on a hill, looking out over the town and the lush, broad Maliana Plain.
I have a story, and I know that everybody does. I hear them too, the daily tragedies on the news, the destruction of lives and the families left behind. And although loss is awful for the victim's family and friends, it can also leave a mark on others. My story is a little different. What happened to me is the story that nobody ever tells, the story that nobody ever thinks to tell or even asks about. I didn't know the man. I was just a stranger. But he planned it. He planned it to be me. I know what he was thinking. A stranger wouldn't care, right? A stranger wouldn't suffer. He was wrong. It's been 3 years now, and still I have to fight each day. I didn't need to know him to feel the loss. I didn't need to know him to dream of him. I didn't need to know him to live with his pain. Imagine it. Wife, kids, business, day-to-day life. You speak to him a few days prior, organising the job. He tells you on the phone to let yourself in. He'll be working in the garage. In my profession, it's not uncommon to be in and out on paint day. So you let yourself in and head to the garage. Suddenly, because of this man, this stranger who planned it, your life is in turmoil. It was too late to help. I knew that. I knew it the second I saw him, but they didn't, those on the phone. I couldn't help. They came. They took him. I told my story. I went home. That was the end of it. Nobody called to check up on me. Nobody offered me help. Was I supposed to move on? Supposed to just forget about it? What about me? The psychologist says it's trauma, but I already know that. What I'm feeling now is guilt. Guilt for my family, for my wife and kids that I've been absent from, for how close I've come to ending this journey for myself without them ever knowing it. I know that if I choose that path, I too will be passing on the pain. But hell, it's tough to live. He awakened a dark and ever-present place inside of me. He pulled it to the surface, not knowing or simply not caring what would come of my life. So here I am, finally telling the story of a stranger, the stranger you never think about. He planned it. What about me?
But first, the winter that death came calling. We hadn't met before, which might be why I didn't recognise her and so duly let her in. Perhaps her visit was long overdue, considering. At first she was an unobtrusive guest. She kept her distance and was very quiet. Occasionally, though, I'd hear her singing softly. I couldn't catch the words, but the melody intrigued me. I don't think the others noticed her, sitting in the corner there, watching at the window, lying in our brimming bath. Sometimes I'd refer to her obliquely, perhaps hum her tune a little, but nothing seemed to rouse recognition. Once, though, someone asked me roughly, "Do you have death staying with you?" An anger ripple rose, a sense of cornering. She seemed so benign, and besides, I'd grown accustomed to her company. Of course not, I lied, and that was that. A year passed with her gentle lingering. The seasons came and went, which in itself was bittersweet. Time trod on regardless. Regardless, time trod on. But then I approached. It was on a short, dark day when the winds were howling, after a vicious night. My arms wouldn't lift to wash my hair or to pour some tea. My legs couldn't bear the weight of clothes or gravity. My eyes twitched, jaw cracked, pain ricocheted, muscles mocked. My addled mind was full of fog and longing for forgetting. I just wanted to ask about her song. She sang it for me, nestled in my room, on the floor with the curtains curling and grey clouds looming. She sang a whisper song of release, promises of sleep, resting long and deep, as soothing as a lullaby, a final, sweet relief. But then I heard our car returning, little legs running down the hall, and 3 bursts of everything tumbled in. One suddenly on my lap, one so loud about so much, and the other smooching at my sodden cheek.
He soon followed with his eyes full of "How are you faring?" and a coffee in his hand. "We brought you this just in case." He crouched down to me. He bent down. He reached those arms of all there is around my fractured frame. And we sat, the five of us, and watched the storm roll heavy past our window. I let them hold me. I finally let them see. And I was one of the lucky ones. I know that to my aching bones. For the siren song of suicide finally let me be, after a battle hidden warriors know too well. And I recognize her voice now, so will try not to sing along. But that winter was bitter and far, far too long.
That was A Hard Won Spring, selected by Ian Rawson, who represents mental health services here in the Hunter. And Ian's here with us today. So Ian, can you tell us why you chose that piece to win the award and a little about the connection between mental health and grief?
So for me, often the deep, dark feelings of depression that sometimes accompany grief and loss seem so indescribable. But what we've found in this project, that people have been able to describe such painful feelings in such a powerful way that it's been amazing to read. In fact, it's been quite hard as a judge to read some of these. But I'm also very privileged to read it. The reason I chose this piece, it talks about the pain and the deepness and the darkness that can sometimes lead someone to think about suicide. What I like about this piece, it also offers hope that there are beautiful, amazing things in life that can bring someone back from that precipice.
The next two awards go to two pieces that we regard as receiving our pastoral awards. They are the awards gifted by the Blue Knot Foundation and the award from the Calvary Martyr Private Hospital. The Blue Knot Foundation is a specialised foundation that supports people who have survived childhood trauma, be that child abuse, neglect, or domestic violence. And we encourage you to look at the Blue Knot Foundation website. The award for that prize today goes to #, which will be read by Judy, and the Calvary Martyr Hospital Pastoral Care Award goes to a piece titled "I Have the Weight of a Life That is Substantive and Real on My Shoulders," and that will be read by Michelle.
I have been silent for too long, my soft tresses pulled taut in a bun of compliance. Complicit? My lashes devoid of the black that might suggest flirtation or flippancy. A life of not dancing, not smiling too loudly, of skirts lengthened, of thighs held tight and heels demure. I have been silent for too long, my voice a soft modulation in a knot of modesty. Moderated? My lobes devoid of the glitter that might suggest flashiness or frivolity. A life of not laughing widely or shining brightly, of blouses buttoned tight, of hidden hips and lips nude. When I might have raged or whispered names, shouted pain, cried oceans, I slipped beneath the surface and hugged my silence. I did not give myself. I did not consent. I have been silent for too long. Now my pain is a #, and still I cannot.
Grieving begins when the person whose death will vibrate through you is still alive and ringing. It begins on a lunch break when you can't make it across town to visit them and get back to work in time to earn your $20 an hour. It begins on a morning where everything is going wrong and you promise you'll go later to that wing that smells like disinfectant and is titled after some missionary who died so long ago, even the marble is forgetting their name. But you end up not having time, and there will never be a good time to stand on that threshold with sweaty hands, looking in on darkness that is now within one you love too. Grief grows behind your turn back like a child until it's so big and ugly you don't even recognise it as yours. You can't grieve publicly. You must grieve in the privacy of your own home, lest your grief contaminate passers-by and the whole world gets infected with grief and calls in sick and nothing gets done and the world stops turning from the black force of our grief. And we realise that the war will finally destroy civilization will not be fought on the sea or in trenches, but in the secrecy of the heart, a long and lonely war that has been waged approximately forever. Most of all, you must pretend your grief doesn't exist, like a hefty bill you haven't opened yet. How come the sun can find time to travel 150 million kilometres each day to celebrate and grieve for itself, and you can't even drive across town to hold her hand, old and thin as the Salvation Army fabric she wears? You can't find time to go tell her it'll be all right, even though you both know it won't. And maybe she won't even be conscious. Maybe you'll pop over and she'll be asleep and you'll promise to come back and never come back. Your mind turns on what she sees and must be thinking every time she wakes up in that strange room she will die in, and suddenly there's tears on your steering wheel and you're shaking and you think you're having a heart attack and maybe you'll die. Maybe you'll die before her and you'll never have to go back to that facility that makes your soul feel like it's a small pool of water under a heat light. But you're not dying. Grief has just dawned over your planet and you pick up the phone and call in sick and finally go see her, and on that day she can give up fighting, and on that day she dies graciously right after you leave. She waits for your footsteps to echo out the building. The last conversation she'll have is just her consoling you, and the tears never end because they were there from the start, and the sky is clear, and on that day she dies.
Now we're going to hear 4 pieces that have each received the awards donated by our funeral services. I like to thank Gary Bellinger, who is the manager of the Newcastle and Lake Macquarie Memorial Parks, who worked tirelessly to select on behalf of the funeral services these 4 pieces to receive the awards. Our funeral services, White Lady Funerals and David Lloyd Funerals and Simplicity Funerals, have all been part of the Grieve project since the early days. It makes complete sense to approach our funeral services and engage them in this important project, and we thank them for their ongoing support. Here are the 4 recipients of those awards.
Did we pay for the consultation? I can't exactly remember, but we must have. It is, after all, the contract you have with service providers, even if the service is not at all what you'd hope for. I do remember that the receptionist, who was also the wife of the specialist, thanked us. As she did so, she wore an expression of genuine consolation, which only made her look self-conscious, knowing frankly, as she did, that any consolation was impossible. We in turn thanked her, playing our part in the polite exchange of social manners, and made good our escape into the outside world. But outside is no longer the same. The sunny afternoon brings no relief. There is no air to breathe, no warmth to feel. Everything in my chest is falling into the deep pit of my stomach. My stomach then bungee jumps down into some deeper ravine. My stare lingers too long at things I cannot see. My gaze shifts, but nothing changes. A crack materialises that in time will become a great gulf, a gulf that will eventually tear us apart. We cling to each other and weep, each in our own universe of pain, our minds simultaneously traversing the millions of eons of everything that will be gone. We hold on tighter. Later. Finally, a moment alone. The primal physicality of grief descends. An avalanche of pain falls through my body as if seeping down through the ages into my blood. My crumpled face held by sodden palms, ribcage heaving up and down. I'm doubled over with disbelief and comprehension in the same instant. My head tosses wildly from left to right, frantically trying to loosen the grip of this new reality. I am a cat flying through emptiness, scrambling to untangle all the bits of myself and land feet first on the ground. Only there is no ground. I can't land. The ground has vanished. I am free-falling, flailing in infinity. Time, space, solidity, substance all fail me. I am a million broken pieces shattered in the dark. I am lost to myself. I grope for some coherence, some truth, and it comes, but it is unbearable. It is the banal truth of life. The certain fact that our very existence brings with it the equal certainty that to us all an end will come. We are all stripped bare by our naked, raw humanity. To live is to die, and his time is nigh. Fear stalks me constantly from behind. I am catapulted forward, searching for some certain beauty. But this new terrain is barren. I am thwarted, driven mad by search for something that no longer exists. My old self, my old life, my blissful ignorance of this storm of pain. I am face to face with grief and death, smug comrades in arms, lurking around together. So let me introduce you to my new friends. They are always greeting new people.
He gazes at me, stares at what I am wearing. The sight of my joggers excites him and he staggers out of bed. His eyes, clouded and weary, plead, "Take me with you. I can still do this." I grab his leash and he trundles beside me, stopping to sniff the grass. He pees, and I look in horror at the stream of crimson, undiluted blood streaming onto the ground as he empties his bladder. I have to make a decision. I know about the tumour, but I thought we still had a few months left together. Rex loves to ride in the car, but I feel like a traitor, knowing that I am betraying his trust. The only consoling factor is that this journey is more difficult for me than it is for him. We enter the waiting room. I sit, he stands beside me. The pit of my stomach is hollow and I feel nauseous, but I force a smile at the teenage girl cradling her puppy. She nods at Rex. He's very old and sick, I feel like adding, but say, he's 13. We enter the consulting room. He explores. His nose twitches with excitement as he slowly moves around each and every inch of the room. The vet and her assistant enter the room and his tail wags in recognition. He resumes his sniffing as we discuss the non-existent options for his future. Satisfied that we are all making the right decision, the two women leave the room. It gives us a little more time together. I crouch beside him, hugging him for reassurance that I really am making the right decision. You were our protector and guardian. Do you remember how devastated Mum was when Dad died? She would have been lost without you. He leans against me and stares, cocking his head as he studies my quivering lips and misty eyes. Tears stream down my cheeks as I throw my arms around his neck. He gives me a quizzical look and licks the saltiness away. Everything is easier for me if you are here, he seems to say. Even your death, I wonder? The ladies reappear, and it is only then that he looks fearful as they both converge upon him, one holding a hypodermic syringe filled with blue liquid. Reassure him, pat him, the vet says. I hold his face in my hands and stroke his nose. Remember that I love you, I say to him. A look of bewilderment fills his eyes as the needle enters his front leg and the vet depresses the plunger. I see his life ebb before me and he slumps to the floor before all of the deadly liquid has even left the syringe. We'll be back soon, whispers the vet. The door hushes shut behind them. I close his staring, lifeless eyes and stroke his muzzle one last time.
Don't tell your mother, he says, taking a drag of his smoke. The tobacco crackles, glowing red as he breathes it deep down into his lungs. I'm not sure if he's asking me or telling me, so I say nothing. I just nod. Smoke wafts past me as I watch as the tiny cloud evaporates into thin air, as if it never existed. He's been chain smoking since this morning, when she said she wanted a divorce. I see the trails his tears have left, winding their way down the sides of his face and running under his chin. His cheeks are reddened from the crying, and I imagine his eyes are stinging, aching with rawness. Where'd you throw it? I ask him. Round there somewhere, he says, pointing a metre or so away from the bank. It wouldn't matter if he knew the exact spot anyway, I think. The ring is gone forever, settling into its new home deep amongst the rich brown clay of the dam floor. I remember when we were younger, my sisters and I smeared that very same clay all over our bodies and faces, much to our mother's dismay. It never fully washed out of our clothes, which were left with pale brown splotches afterwards. I throw a pebble into the water and watch as ripples spread across the surface, creating miniature waves. I remembered how the water temperature here could change so quickly. 1 minute you could dip your fingertips into its murkiness and feel as if your submerged fingers were being sliced off with the sharpest of blades, the cleanest of cuts. Yet only moments later you could dive into the depths of it and find surprisingly warm patches to loll about in. Just like my mother changing her mind, I think, as indecisive as that. Hot and cold. Yesterday, she wanted to work on their marriage. Today, she wants a divorce. What's she doing? He asks. I don't want to tell him the truth, that she's packing her bags. So I lie to him. Watching TV, I reply. She told me to come find you, that you'd probably want to talk. At least that part is true. He gives a small laugh, or maybe it's a grunt. I can't be sure. And here we are, he says, lifting his hand as if presenting the dam to me, the way you proudly present a gift to someone. So, what now? I ask. Our border collie Jess nudges my knee and Dad grabs a tuft of his fur and begins pulling a mat in it. Stuffed if I know, he says, grinding out his cigarette on the dusty earth. He drags the butt across a rock, leaving a black smear of ash. He buries his face in Jess's fur and sobs. A deep, guttural sound I've never heard before. One that I never knew he was capable of making.
At this stage in the pregnancy, we would expect to see a heartbeat. Her voice is kind, but her words do not make sense. They bounce from my skull like hailstones from a windscreen. She places the probe back on the table and peels off her gloves, and I see the way her stomach swells under the fabric of her pale green dress. She catches my eye, blushes. "I'll leave you to get dressed," she says. I don't know how I find my way back to the waiting room. Every corridor looks the same, but somehow I am there. A television blares from its mount in the corner. There is something wrong with the dubbing. The sound and the picture are all out of whack. A newsreader announces a fatal stabbing in Sydney's West, and a blonde presenter throws her head back in a silent laugh, her shiny pink lips stretched taut across bright white teeth. An eternity passes before the doctor calls my name again. She's young, younger than me. I doubt her instantly. They've got it wrong. This wouldn't be the first time. She wants to explain my options to me, she says. She would recommend surgery, but of course it's my choice. I place a protective hand on my stomach. You cannot hear this. You are there, you are mine. I feel you. I need to leave this place with its words and terms that I do not want to understand. Expected, medical, surgical management. They are for someone else. They're not for you. It's all wrong. That night I lie in bed with you. I will you to live. I will you with all my heart and soul. I believe you can do it. We are one and the same. And I believe in you. The next morning, the bleeding begins. Physically, you do not bring me any pain. You slip away without complaint. You surprise me in that way, and I am grateful to you for that. But with you, you take a piece of me. A week later, a different stenographer this time. Perhaps they don't let the green dress lady see people like me. She tells me it is good news. My uterus is empty. There is no need for any further intervention. I marvel at her choice of words. Under the circumstances, this is the best outcome we could have hoped for, she says. I wonder if I'm supposed to feel grateful. She keeps talking. My chances next time are good. No increased chance of miscarriage. Most women will go on to have a successful pregnancy. On and on and on. But I do not care about next time. It is you I have lost. I want you. On the way out, I pass the hospital chapel. I am not religious, but something draws me inside. It is quiet and calm and peaceful. I sit down. My head falls to my knees. You are gone. I let the tears come.
Such strong and powerful works. Okay, so next we have the awards that are our specialised awards. We receive a lot of works into the Grieve project about death and dying, and so it was only natural that some organisations would want to award special pieces. So the Good Grief Award from goodgrief.org is specifically for a work about grief or loss other than death. And today that is awarded to the piece This Big Bright Land, which will be read by David. Following that, we'll hear the All About Grief award-winning piece. This is for a work about grief or loss after the death of a child. That piece is The Day After Coming Home from Hospital, read by Karen. Here are our two special awards.
Remember the trip over? Us, pressed against windows, little mouths open, ready to gulp in the vast blue Pacific, filling more space than we knew the world contained, shimmering as confidently as the Milky Way. Us, flying hand in clammy hand over the chaped moonscape of this great land. Brother, I wait for you, in a grey room whose walls reach for me, sticky stains that smell like dog piss. They lead me along the long, lightless hall, a confused chorus of male voices yelling pleas, greetings, insults, bounces off cold concrete. When I look at you, wide hollow eyes, meatless cheekbones, wispy limbs eaten by saws, I see faceless ghosts. The ones we thought couldn't cross the Pacific followed us here. Headless uncles lying in the street, screams shattering the surface of the night. Then here, ghettos of grief in cluttered housing blocks, no words, no care, no help, no jobs. Just quick, cheap fixes. You inhabited a smoky haze with off-white air so thick, so foggy, hard human shapes couldn't form. They will send you back to Timor. They will say you failed to comply. You didn't fit. The shadow you cast is too long for the bright light of this place. And I'm afraid you will wander alone in a place children tried to forget but could not, calling no names, holding no hands.
While the sun kept shining as if nothing had happened, I was standing under the clothesline in the backyard, seething. The cars were rushing past beyond the fence, everyone on their way somewhere, but I wanted the whole world to stop, for one moment, pay attention, because our 2-year-old daughter had just died in my arms. It felt reasonable to blame God, who had allowed the goldfish to survive in our absence. I was so angry I longed to smash the fish tank on the concrete. I wanted to express the unfairness of life, that's why. To express the unfairness of life, that's why I longed to smash the fish tank on the concrete. I wanted to blame God, who had allowed the goldfish to survive in our absence. I was so angry because our 2-year-old daughter had just died in my arms. It felt reasonable I wanted the world to stop and for one moment pay attention. The cars were rushing past beyond the fence, everyone on their way somewhere. But I was standing under the clothesline in the backyard, seething while the sun kept shining as if nothing had happened.
Next, we announce the $500 awards. These are generously donated, 2 separate awards, one by Palliative Care Australia and the other by Lifeline. Our local Lifeline, Hunter and Central Coast, has generously given $500 also. So, the Palliative Care Australia Award is to The Line Our Thread and will be read by David. The Lifeline Award is The Skeleton and that will be read by Megan. Very stirring pieces.
Last night I spoke about you to another friend, remembering our last phone call when you were too weak to hold the handset to your ear on the pillow. And the blue nurse, as you called her, the home carer, pressed the speaker button so my voice could be heard stretched and floating on the bed sheet beside you. My friend and I talked about how, once in a while, we can know absolutely when it's the last time. We can come to know when, for instance, the silk strands that tether the dying are lifting, and our loom with the dear one will soon be still. The blue nurse, as you called her, omitted or forgot to switch off the speaker button, replace the handset in its black cradle, perhaps because I didn't say goodbye as such. I had said thank you quietly, imagining January sunlight stripped by shutters in your room, the sweep of the ceiling fan, Ollie, the Labrador by the bed frame, scent of the flowers that filled the house, distilled with magnolia blossoming outside. I knew there was a bunch of peonies in a tall glass. The veranda was dusty from the Queensland storms. that as your breathing had become inaudible, the soughing of palm trees and the high-set house seemed calmer, deeper, in crescendo. It was up to me to ring off from the phone call, lose the line, our thread, rest my handset in its silver cradle and keep talking, holding, the peonies embracing Ollie, blessing blue nurses and the wordless wisdom of the morphine drip.
Be at peace now, they said, when they finally found my child. The sun was about to rise, not quite dawn, but somehow no longer night. I used to watch the light change in her eyes and know she was going to smile right before she smiled. The wind was waking too, making the trees sound like laughter. They didn't know any better. It was barely spring. The leaves were immature. That's the way it goes in nature. One day you're naked, the next you're dressed all in green, weaving a nest and dreaming of eggs. They asked if I wanted to see her bones. When I choked, yes, they showed me an empty bird cage. The bird was nowhere to be seen.
So now we come to our major sponsors. The National Association of Loss and Grief have been with us since the beginning of this project, and very soon after they were joined by the Australian Centre for Grief and Bereavement, based in Melbourne, and the Australian Funeral Directors Association. Each of these organisations have gifted 2 prizes, and now we're going to hear the announcement of those pieces that have won the $500 awards from each of those 3 big sponsors. So, the National Association of Loss and Grief $500 award is given to A Day in October, which will be read by Dale. The Australian Centre for Grief and Bereavement $500 award has been awarded to One Word, which will be read by Tony. The Australian Funeral Directors Association $500 award has been awarded to Would Haves, which will be read by Doris. Congratulations to all 3 authors.
It was an odd sort of day to take her leave, the wind faltering in the tulle curtains she'd sewn when they first moved into the place. A day that wasn't certain of its own purpose, as though all that it had come to believe of itself was suddenly in doubt, and in the face of dying had lost its nerve, preferring to keep a polite distance. She lay as she'd never done before, stately under an embroidered bedspread, her hands fanned beside her, her skin turned to wax in the light of the late afternoon. Of course, we gathered, as family do, around her bed, silent and poised, waiting for the last bullet of breath, for the pendulum in her chest to stall in its motion. We expected to hear bells when it was over, but none came. It seemed as though she'd just excused herself for a moment and walked out of the room, leaving us there with our stony feet, unable to meet each other's gazes, because if we did, we would have to admit she was never coming back.
Some words commit murder. Hanging in the air, then a hard punch to the guts. Their pain is physical. Sorry. There it is. Heard it 1,000 times. But right now it is coming at me from a stern-looking doctor with greying temples, my dad's age. He holds my gaze with heavy eyes, trained not to look away, and he speaks slowly in a voice made from gravel. I picture the word sign waving the 2 meters between us, from his lips, sailing over the green linoleum, past the fading Monet print, into me. He shakes his head as if wanting to rid the aftertaste, the finality. You don't hear as much as feel them, those murderous words, because oddly they are silent. Maybe it's because our ears, suspicious of their intent, block them out. But they creep in under the skin. My stomach heaves and I have to hold back from retching. The lino sways in front of me. I am seasick. But I'm uncertain if it is from his sorry or from the smell of the eucalyptus deodorizer losing its battle against the rising tide of vomit wafting in from the corridor. He repeats himself and I hear it loud and clear now. But my insides have already registered its impact. I can't help it and my mouth fills with sharp mucus. I spit into a tissue and apologise. He nods. He has seen this 1,000 times. Peter is in the room too, sleeping. I fully expect her to spring open her eyes just like she did this morning, kiss me and disappear into the shower. Lullaby, she'd sing, flying out the door to work, the scent from her apple blossom shampoo lingering. Lullaby, I'd call back. It was our private joke. Goodbyes are too final, but a lullaby blankets you in a blissful reminder of someone you love. Except now there is a tube poking out of her mouth, connected to a hose snaking over to an appliance that looks like a washing machine. It is pushing air into her lungs with a metronomic rhythm. She's a rag doll held onto this side of life by a contraption that looks more at home in our laundry. She'd love the irony. What do I have to do to get you to do the washing, Ben? Glioblastoma multiforme, he says, and then explains that the tumour had been hiding, growing undetected in her brain. Today it declared itself by puncturing an artery. She would have laughed at that. A tumour in my brain? Ha! I feel fine. But then maybe that's a blessing. She never knew. I use the walls to help me across to the bed. I stroke her beautiful washed hair. I lean over and take in its fragrance. I kiss her, putting my lips to her ear. I take a deep breath and whisper, lullaby.
Loss changes everything, especially words. Suddenly you no longer have the privilege to speak these words about him. Will becomes would have. He would have turned 27. He would have liked this podcast. I wonder what he would have said when Trump was elected. He would have been so pleased I'm donating blood. The first time you catch yourself saying would have instead of will, it chokes out of your throat, each sound scraping as it makes its way out. It's a change the others don't even notice. But for you, it changes everything. It has taken away possibilities. It has marked the finality of it all. 4 siblings has now 3. And as you say the would-haves, your brain creeps into the could-haves. What could have helped? What could you have done? Could this really be as endless as it feels? The would-haves mark the start of the grey time, where every sound is muffled, every colour dampened, and every feeling muted. You move slowly with laboured steps, and then suddenly within this grey, a word reaches out and assaults you, throwing you to the ground and knocking the air from you. Words that you never noticed before now leave you winded. But so unremarkably slowly, the would-haves change. Something around them softens. There is a gentleness that lingers around what were once such jagged words. To have known and loved him so well that you can say with certainty what he would have done. To remember him so clearly that you know what he would have liked. To be able to explore how he would have thought about something just from the many hours spent with him. A slow warmth builds. You learn that he will be with you, standing by your thoughts, decisions and dreams. And you will be okay, knowing that he would have stayed if he could.
Weren't they wonderful pieces? And now we come to our final major awards. We have 3 to announce. There is the $1,200 Australian Funeral Directors Association Award, and that is awarded to the piece Time, which will be read by Ian. And then our reader Dale, who you have heard from previously, will read our 2 winning pieces. The Australian Centre for Grief and Bereavement $1,500 award goes to Not Horses or Mothers. The National Association of Loss and Grief, the NALAG award, also $1,500, is awarded to Blood and Bone. Enjoy our 3 major award-winning pieces.
Recently, I found myself wishing for more time, but also for time to speed up so the pain doesn't have to be felt for so long. I want more time to enjoy with the people who I know have to leave. Time to enjoy their company, learn their stories and sit in their presence just a little longer. I want it to work for me. More of the good stuff that makes life so amazing while speeding up time when life is painful and almost unbearable. Time when the reality that they're really gone sets in. When the final goodbye has been said. When the ache in my heart grows and grows until it feels like it may burst. When it's harder to get out of bed in the morning or return home because they used to be there. When the fear of facing the grief appears bigger than the need to heal. I just wanted more time. More time to enjoy her and to know her. Or maybe just less time feeling the pain now that she's gone. I've done grief many times in my life, and I've often done it differently. The first few times I didn't know any better. Later it was because I had learnt something that allowed me to grieve differently. Sometimes I ignored my grief because the task of letting go seemed overwhelming. I even saw my pain as a way to stay close to someone I had lost. My pain couldn't be bad if it reminded me of them. That belief chipped away at my heart, at my hope that I could heal, that life could get better. And now, after all I've learnt, I still wish for an easier way, a less painful way. While I miss all that I have lost in this life, it is time that I miss the most. I've never had any control over it. I've never had enough of it, or sometimes I've had too much. Too much time alone, in silence, to feel the depths of my grief and my heartache. I met Time the other day. She listened while I told her what I believe I need from her for a better life. I told her how she was always giving me too much and sometimes too little of herself. I yelled, angry that she couldn't see what I needed. But she said, "There is always enough. Enough of me to appreciate what you have, and enough to heal when there is loss. It's your choice what you do with the amount I give you. You can embrace the time when you're grieving and use it to heal, or you can find a way to distract yourself from the pain. This may help for a while, but it will leave you with even less than you have been given. Less time to feel, to process and to be set free. It's always your choice how you use it. So choose wisely. Your heart depends on it."
Mother, whose life is almost spent, we no sooner arrive than you are readying us to leave. Our names fall through you like water through a sieve. Migration is inevitable. On the river whose far bank is unknowable, there's a boat with your name on it. The water birds stand on one leg and shiver their wings. The blank-eyed fish kiss the tide's underbelly. The horses lower their muzzles to drink. Nothing lasts, not horses or mothers. Meanwhile, the wind runs across the fields. The wind runs across the fields. She wants to thump her body into blooming bruises and rip her insides out and spill her loathsome intestines and organs all over the betraying earth, throw herself down on the black dirt and pound her fists until they bleed and fall apart, and dig her hands into the soil so her fingernails split down to the quick, to scream eternally from the pit of her soul and tear the stinking grouse out of the earth by the roots and slam her useless head until her skull smashes open and her brain splits into 1,000,000 rotten atoms and becomes sludge and stops torturing her, to dig her own grave with her bare hands and bury herself deep under the layers of seasons and suffering, suffocate herself with thick mouthfuls of humus, clog her lungs with sand and silt and fill up her eyes with quartz and turn to the sky to let the crows peck them out, to welcome the crawling worms and the fat slugs and curling slaters and creeping ants into her body to consume her piece by piece, to let the creatures pick her flesh from her bones and strip her skeleton clean, so she is just a pile of collagen and calcium and phosphate decaying into granite, and crack her bones open and spill out the marrow, let it pour out with her blood and seep into the basalt and limestone, be carried away by floods and winds, washed into a river and spat out into the sea, swept far south to the pole and become frozen into a glacier and melted by the warm forming oceans evaporated into the sky and condense and rain down as a torrent onto this treacherous place. Instead, she stands silently and watches as they lower the tiny coffin.